All right. Hey there, and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about resisting intrusive thoughts. And so, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Codde. I'm the founder of Restored Minds and the creator of the AAA response. If you haven't dove into any of that, I have some links down in the notes, that will lead you to my book or some other resources that will help you on your journey. And if you're looking for help and guidance when it comes to OCD and anxiety recovery, you can head over to restoredminds.com and connect with me and my team, or you can check out the links in the notes. Also, if you enjoy the show, please help us out by liking, subscribing, and clicking that notification. So with that said, let's go and dive into resisting intrusive thoughts and why that is such a hurdle to one's recovery. So with intrusive thoughts, one of the big hangups people get caught on with OCD and anxiety is intrusive thoughts. And these intrusive thoughts tend to focus on kind of three main categories. They could be harmful, they could be sexual, or they could be religious or existential. And when it comes to navigating intrusive thoughts, one of the things that we need to do is really become non-resistant to their experience. And the paradox of that is generally the intrusive thought, the reason we find it intrusive in the first place is because it's so counter to who we really are and what we really want. And we have this false belief that if we don't resist it and try to get rid of it or suppress it or remove it, that's somehow us agreeing with it. And we got to understand that there's a big spectrum of experiences or options we have when it comes to intrusive thoughts, right? So, you could literally on the far end of an intrusive thought, you could agree with it. Yeah, I guess that is what I want or all that stuff. That's not what we're talking about. Okay. And even then, you wouldn't really ever do that because you would recognize that that's not a congruent reaction because you wouldn't agree with something that you found intrusive. Right. So when we talk about agreeing with the thought, we're really agreeing with the mind itself and not getting in the conversation with the mind, right? We're never agreeing with the content of the thought because we know the content of the thought is not something that is reflective of us. That's why we have such a negative reaction or such a fearful reaction in general. And this leads us into the question of, okay, well, how do I know it's an intrusive thought? Well, a lot of the ways that we identify if something's an intrusive thought is just the energy state or the emotional state of the person that's experiencing them. So someone who has a thought that is more egocentric, right? The energy is going to match that, right? So it's the difference between let's say someone has a sexual intrusive thought versus a sexual fantasy. Someone having a sexual fantasy in their mind, they're not going to perceive that to be intrusive. Right? Someone having an intrusive thought that's completely incongruent with their real desires, right? Again, it's a totally different energy state. So the sexual fantasy state is more the energy of desire, right? And when you're talking about a sexual intrusive thought, you're going to be moving into more the energy and the emotion of fear around it. And that's what the person's going to experience internally. They're going to be saying I'm terrified. I feel fear. So what we want to do is really confront the energy underneath the thought. And in order to do that, though, we have to really become in a non-resistant state to the intrusive thought itself. And so the way that happens is we need to first understand this idea of consciousness, right? And so I talk about this, I think, in chapter 6 of the book. So if you haven't gotten the book yet, there's a whole section and there's a chapter just on this, right? So this is very important. And so I have a link to the book in the notes, but this idea of consciousness is just so important to you understanding intrusive thoughts and overcoming them. And the book is $6, right? And you have you can read it or get the audiobook. It's literally a bundle for the same price. So if you haven't gotten that yet, please go and check that out. But consciousness is this idea of our awareness, right? That we are, that we're aware that we're having thoughts to begin with, which is really our state of consciousness. And when you understand that you are consciousness and not the mind, that That's the idea. That separation is the most important step that we can first make to start handling intrusive thoughts. Because if you're trying to handle intrusive thoughts from the idea that you are the mind, you're going to just fight with the mind. And transparently, you're never going to win. I've never met anyone that has outthought the mind, right? Now, when we understand that we're consciousness, then we begin to working at intrusive thoughts from a higher level of the disengagement, the noticing, the witnessing, and being able to observe them, and really get into a non-resistant state in their presence. Now that is easier said than done. And that's where it comes back down to being able to notice and confront the energy underneath the thought and really be with the entire experience in a non-adverse state, a non-resistant state. And that's really what we're trying to move to here with intrusive thoughts is, how do you become non-resistant? Well, the first thing you need to realize is that you're not the mind, you're your consciousness. And from that place, we got to be able to notice and be conscious of whatever's going on, right? So when, and this is the idea of witness consciousness for those who, like Michael Singer's work, right? Or, Eckhart Tolle just talks about the idea of consciousness. Obviously, Dr. Hawkins, who I'm very partial and a big fan of, really goes into this idea of consciousness and really dedicated a lot of years of studying this idea and really explaining it. So when it comes to intrusive thoughts, though, the way we become non-resistant, the first thing is to really notice that we aren't the thoughts themselves and notice that we're consciousness, right? So being able to just notice that I'm having a thought or that I'm experiencing a thought, and then being able to shift our awareness to the energy underneath it and really confront that energy. So if we feel fear, to feel the fear, right? And to really be with that until it dissipates on its own. And we have to be both non-resistant to the thought and the energy underneath it. So I talk about this more in the book, but I want to kind of offer this explanation because I think it will be helpful to understand. Because if you're trying to get rid of the intrusive thought, you're already in a state of resistance and paradoxically going to keep it going, right? So it's really about taking a complete new approach to that, to understanding intrusive thoughts and really how you're working at them. So again, for more resources, I have the link right down in the notes, so you'll be able to access that. So please check that out. And, again, I hope this was helpful. I hope this served you. And I will look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And I hope you guys have a great week and a great day. Hey there. So if you enjoyed that video, we've linked up a few more videos that we think you'd find helpful as well. And if you have found this helpful, we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing. And if you're looking for help and guidance, please check out restoredminds.com as we have several options for you to get started. See you guys soon.